Okay, welcome students to the very first webinar for the next subject, which is workforce planning. This is the first resource support webinar for this subject. By the end of this session, guys, you'll have all of the information that you need to complete the very first learning activity, which, as I highlight on my screen, is the research workforce requirements learning activity. So just to recap, we'll have 3 support workshops, which will take you through all of the learning activities, and then there'll be a final assessment support workshop, which effectively looks at those assessment tasks that you need to do for this subject, being the 3rd subject in your diploma. Okay, some of the areas that we're going to cover today, by the end of this session, you'll have information and understanding of a broad understanding on what workforce planning actually is. We'll be talking a little bit about workforce composition and understanding your workforce's capability. And we'll also be talking a little bit about workforce diversity and why it matters, some strategies in place to help diversify your workforce. We'll talk a little bit about culture and retention and becoming an employer of choice. Things like exit interviews come up in the conversation as well. And if I actually open up this learning activity, you can see these are the questions here that you've got to answer for this set. There is only 4. And those 4 questions, you'll be right to go ahead and answer those questions by the end of this session. I've also got Sue joining me. Thanks for joining, Sue. How are you doing? She's there. I can
Good,
hear her.
Adam. Delighted to be here. Looking forward to this topic, actually.
Okay, this is good. This is good. I
Of
think
course, I'm here.
this is good. Okay, so workforce planning, I guess this is the topic. This is a conversation we have in this subject, but today with the next couple of sessions, I think look, a good place to always start is usually around a couple of definitions. So I've got a few definitions here. I'm just going to start rolling off these definitions, just things that I've found from various different sites, and obviously including your learning materials too. So actually I should just show you that. Don't forget, guys, to check out the learning materials, click on the learning materials under your lesson, and then you'll see all of the information there. You've got your lesson menu on the left-hand side. You can go directly to a particular part of the actual learning materials if you want to go straight there. So, okay, so let's start with some definitions. First definition I've got here is workforce planning is actually a continuous business planning process of shaping and structuring the workforce to ensure that there is sufficient and sustainable capability and capacity to deliver organizational objectives now and in the future. So there's quite a lot in that actual definition. There's a couple of words, capability and capacity, I think we will clear up in a second for you as well. But the interesting part of this definition, it refers to it as a continuous, it's an ongoing business process, which is there to shape and structure the workforce, so the people. That's what, when we talk about workforce, we're talking about the people, the human resources, the people that are involved, to make sure that there's enough capacity and capability, which we'll talk about in a second, to reach the organizational goals for today and into the future. Here's another one, workforce planning. It is a business-driven and business-owned process. So it's something that happens internally. That's what we mean by business-driven and owned. So it's an internal process. It's about knowing your organization's business and using this knowledge to position your organization's workforce to best deliver your business outcomes and manage workforce-related risks. That's nice. It's actually quite an interesting addition to that definition, manage workforce-related risks. So workforce planning is actually also, in part, as well as it's about to structure your organization to meet the goals of the business, it's also there to manage some of the related risks, workforce-related risks, which we'll talk about a little bit soon. Another explanation here, or why undertake workforce planning, a good explanation here. Workforce planning is a business planning tool that improves your knowledge of your organization's business and funding framework to position your workforce to best deliver the outcomes we just talked about before. So it is a tool that's there to, I guess, better understand what you have in the business, what's available to you in the business. As far as capability and capacity, I think I might just clear those couple of words up because they're words that do get used. It's sort of like core language, I guess, that gets used, capability and capacity, when talking about workforce planning. So capability, what we're talking about when we say workforce capability, we mean what is the workforce? And again, workforce being the people. What are the people capable of being able to do? What can they do? It refers to the skills, it refers to the knowledge of the workforce. It also includes elements such as your ability to be innovative as well. So, what are the sort of skills, what's the knowledge that we have available to us now inside our workforce? That's what we mean by workforce capability. Um, so, yeah, workforce capability can be used to effectively to describe what is there, what's in existence. Um, Now, capacity refers to what can the actual workforce do, refers to the availability of the workforce to do, for example, um, the absolute numbers of staff available with the necessary skill sets. So when used, it's there to describe the numbers of staff. Um, uh, yes, hang on, I'm just getting caught up with my definitions here a little bit. So yeah, the dimension of workforce capacity can be used to describe what's in existence, but what we're talking about is the absolute numbers and the absolute maximum uh, numbers of skill sets that we have in our existence. So you've been listening to me rabbit on here. Do you think I've given it a good explanation there? Capability and capacity?
Yeah, it's all good, Adam.
Okay.
Yes, I suppose you're looking at, I think from my history, having a register almost of what the staff can do, so maybe a training matrix in terms of what they can be specialised in, and then matching that up with business plans to see where you're going,
Yep.
and then like a training need analysis, knowing what the difference is. So being able to then go out and source the new trainers you might need if you're in a training business, or
Yep.
the new chefs you might need, whatever it is.
Okay. I think I'm going to show a diagram now because you started talking about it and like a training needs analysis and things like that. Can you see what's on my screen? I've got a little workforce
Yep,
um, planning cycle, really. I think this might help to explain
yep,
workforce planning as well. So, um,
awesome.
just with the word capacity, it's really the amount, the maximum amount that we're actually able to do. So, let's have a look at this particular cycle. So workforce planning involves these steps. The first step, which we'll talk about shortly, is what we call workforce profiling or an analysis of your workforce. So this is about that capacity and capability. That's what we're looking at here. We're looking at what skills have we got, the capability and the capacity, how much of it can we actually roll out? What's the, what are the numbers effectively? So part of the workforce planning process is to do a profile of what's there in your business. What have we got here? What are the skills that are even available to us? We might even have skills in people that we don't even know about. So we've got you, Sue, as a trainer. Well, you're working for us as a trainer. You might be one of the best administrators in the business. We might be underutilizing your actual skill set. So part of a good workforce plan involves understanding and profiling the people in the business, understanding what that is. Now, there's a real strong link between the strategic direction of the business and workforce planning. In fact, they are wed together. The idea of workforce planning is that it incorporates the direction of the business. It says, okay, so where are we going as a business? Let's make sure that we've got the people, the human resources available and ready to go to meet those challenges wherever our business is particularly going. So the second part of this cycle is looking at the forecast needs. And to do that, what you're wanting to essentially do is estimate how many different types of employees might be required. If we're moving into a new product, if we're moving into a new marketplace, we have to work out what sort of skills do we need to hit that market? How many people do we need? Those are the sort of things. So what we're doing at this point is trying to forecast, what are the type of employees that we need to source, when and where they should be sourced, those sorts of things too. Now, the next stage is to analyze the gap, which is a little bit about what you were talking about there. So at that point, you go, okay, this is what our workforce is capable and capacity. This is what we can do. These are our skills. This is how much of it that we can do at our full amount. This is where we need to be. Number three is just simply, it's the gap. It's what's in between. So what skills might need to be developed? That's what we discover in this third part. Where are the areas that we need to hire for? We shouldn't just go out and hire things that we might already have internally. We might have some of those skills internally. So what are the things that we're going to go external from the business to hire? What are some of the things that we're going to look to develop internally? And doing a workforce profile actually will give you, will give you a lot of help with understanding where you're going to actually develop those. Well, that stage 4 and 5 sort of goes a little bit together too. So developing strategies, it is starting to now go, okay, so we've done our gap analysis. Now, where are we going to get these people from? So what's the strategy involved here? Are we going to, upskill some of our internal staff? Are we going to look to using certain agencies? What are our timelines? What's involved with that? And implementing those strategies is actually just getting, actually implementing those ideas that you're developing. So those two are sort of together. And then, like all good processes and cycles, you've got a monitoring and evaluation stage where you can have a look and see, make some comparisons. One way to sort of compare is having a look at something called what we call retention rates. So how many people stay on, how many people are leaving the business. That's a really good sign just to see that some of your processes are working well. So yeah, that's a bit of an overview, I guess. Sue, did you want to add anything to that overall this cycle? Like, any of the points in this cycle that you'd like to add to? Okay, let's have a look at that first one again. Workforce profiling analysis. So what are some of the things we can do to help profile our workforce? So we know we need to profile our workforce before we can analyze the gaps to work out what we need to hire for, where we need to develop, those sorts of things. What are some of the questions that we can ask ourselves if we're trying to do a workforce profile? So are you there with us still? Okay. Some of the questions that we might ask ourselves are, what are the total number of staff that we have? That's our first, probably most obvious point to start off. Other things such as um, what are the employment modes? So how many of those staff are full time? How many are part time? How many casual? Um, Now the big thing that we talked about before is doing that skills analysis. So what are the skills that we have available in our team? Do we have people that are qualified that we may not know about? We might have a lot of access to skills inside our team that we may not be aware of. So what are the skills? What's the knowledge available? What sort of qualifications do we have in our team, in our workforce? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? So where are the key strengths in our workforce? Where are the key weaknesses? We could also look at what are the ongoing costs, what are the salaries, what are the rates, um, those sorts of things. Maybe the average length of what the average length of service in any given department is. These are the sort of things we can do to help profile our workforce. Maybe you might be trying to work out what the gender mix is. You might realize by profiling you've got all female, all men, and that's kind of dangerous in and of itself. We want to make sure that we have a bit of diversity. Also, what's the age? What's the average age of your staff members as well? There's some things that we can ask. Potentially, what are the current working locations for these employees? So these are the sort of questions that we can ask to help to profile our workforce. So are you there with us? Okay. Now let's just go back and have a look at some of these questions that you guys need to answer here, see if we've gone through any of them. So the first question here, it's asking, what processes do you have in place to collect and keep workplace information on numbers of employees and age and gender breakdown? So this is actually kind of what we're talking about. What this question is asking you is, what are the processes that you have in your workplace or workplaces that you've worked in? If you're not employed at the moment, that's okay. What are some processes that you could use to collect and keep workplace information on your employees? We know it's important, as per with workforce planning now, to make sure that we profile our workforce and have an understanding of what we've got available so that we can better prepare ourselves for filling those gaps to cater for the need of the business. The question that you have in front of you there in question one is, how do you go about doing it? How do you collect that information? What are the things that you're doing? And there are records that you, at any given business, will need to keep by legislation. So by the Federal Fair Work Act of actually 2009, you are required to keep and maintain records, things like the dates and the hours that your employees work, how much they're getting paid. Um, the Act also requires that you give employees regular pay slips. These details need to be provided as either a hard copy or an electronic copy. You must give your employees a copy of those sort of things as well. Um, yeah, what agreement covers their employment? So what sort of award or workplace agreement or any contracts that might be a part of their employment? Starting and finishing times, overtime hours, rates, those sorts of things, leave, annual leave, personal leave, superannuation, these sort of things. These are actually things that are absolutely must be kept by business to be compliant with the Federal Fair Work Act of 2009. So how do businesses do that? How do businesses keep those sort of records? Well, a lot of the time businesses do still use the old-fashioned paper and folder, and they'll have folders and files of information, either contact information, all of the emergency contact details, bank account details, all the personal information on a particular staff member. So you'll still see that you'll still see in business that still does exist. The most common sort of way that these records, I guess, are maintained and kept in terms of information about our workers and staff are through what we call HR management systems. So most businesses will use a combination between a hard copy folder of employee details as well as the electronic version, a HR management system. These systems allow employees to go on and alter their details if you move house, if you're applying for things like leave. So for example, if we've got a team of 100 people and everybody wants to take their week off at Christmas time or at the end of the year, and first week of January, New Year's Eve, something like that, we've got to be aware of, how many people we've got available at any given time. We may not be able to have all 100 members of our team go on holiday in the same week. So these systems will actually help manage things like leave, sick leave. It'll keep those sort of details on file for you. Employers will be able to go into these systems and actually put their application for leave through, things like that. So uh, these systems also, aside from keeping personal records on staff, they also allow individuals to complete areas of compliance that the company need them to complete. So you might be required to sit a test on occupational health and safety. You might be required to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding. Sometimes these systems will actually build in some of this like electronic testing. You might sit down and do a little half an hour or 1 hour test where you answer a series of questions. Those questions are stored electronically in these systems. That is there for compliance. That is there for human resources to be able to access at any time. Say, yes, that particular staff member did complete the workplace health and safety component that they're required to as part of legislation. So a human resource management system is the sort of typical way that they do that. So that's what we're looking for in that first question. So did you want to add anything else to, I guess, the way that organizations keep and collect details about employees in terms of their profile? Um, the thing that I've seen, yeah, sorry, go for it.
I do some work for a dentist, so it's a small practice, and predominantly that's all paper-based, exactly as you were saying.
Mm.
And then I've come along as their accountant to do their best, and so I've started using so some of the details now for their payroll, for example, going onto that system, and you can keep most of those records that you've talked about on that system, and it'll generate reports. So then we've all got to have pay slips now, as you said, according to the Act. So I suppose it's an easy way sometimes, but it depends on the business and the people operating it and how much work they've got to do, and how computer literate they are. Sometimes it's easier to use paper-based than having electronic, but it's all determined on the information that goes in, and the information that comes out has to
Yeah,
be quality rather than just rubbish. The
I still,
important part.
my experience with these systems, and look, every company tends to use their own system, and the reality is that every business has a different need, has different requirements as part of legislation to cover. So, a construction business might have more sort of health and safety things to cover than a tax agent, but the tax agent might have to deal in privacy law, and you really might have to go through those sort of rigors. So, depending on what the industry is, it might have different needs and wants. Um, the thing that I see that doesn't get done well in this space is businesses don't seem to be great at profiling their own staff members well. Time and time again, I see businesses operating that don't even realize the skill set that's available to them. The staff members have all of these wonderful skills, and I mean, even in my
Yep.
team now, we've got a biomedic engineer working in our team, and he's doing all of our back-end administration. Now, um, we don't actually have a need for a biomedic engineer at the moment in our team, but that's the interesting thing is that there's so many skills available to you just in your own team that are sitting there right there, and I think businesses fail to see what's available in front of them. They're quick to go out and hire people, hire people, hire people, and interestingly enough, there's quite a lot of talent available to them. So that's just it's just an interesting sort of conundrum, I guess. The next thing I think we should talk about is diversity. Diversity is a big issue, I guess, or it relates quite strongly to this subject. So let's talk a little bit about what diversity means. So diversity in the workforce essentially means having employees from a wide range of backgrounds. When we talk about wide range of backgrounds, we mean different ages, different genders, so male and female mix, different ethnicities, different physical abilities. That's diversity in and of itself. Might be a different religious belief or different working experience. It could also be different educational backgrounds as well. That is what we mean by diversity. So it's about embracing differences, and that's what we mean about diversity. A couple of quick facts. Actually, these are straight out of the learning materials, which are great. 4 in every 10 Australians are actually migrants or children of migrants. 1 in 4 Aussies was actually born overseas. 13.7% of Australians were born in non-English speaking countries, and people in Australia from 160 different countries, people from 160 different countries actually live here in Australia. So this means that in our society that there are many cultural groups and subcultures that will impact in your work and your relationships. You actually need to work cooperatively um, and responsibly with these diverse groups to maximize the benefit. I guess the question is, what are the why do we do this? What are the benefits of embracing diversity and things like that? Um, well, cultural diversity actually can improve your bottom line. Um, Companies that actually international research actually shows that there's clear economic benefits for organizations that do embrace diversity and cultural diversity. Companies with high executive and board diversity had an average of 53% higher return on investments and lower levels of earnings before. Sorry, beg your pardon. 14% higher earnings before interest and taxation. This is a study that was done in the US, so I'm just reading some stats off the sheet here. So I guess the idea of cultural diversity and innovation works really well because bringing a whole group of different people together is going to be able to provide you with opportunities for seeing a whole range of ideas and a whole range of experiences, and that actually can assist in maximizing innovation. So yeah, look, I think cultural diversity can help a business to better understand a service or better understand their client base as well. I mean, if we're in Australia, we recognize that we're quite a culturally diverse country in and of itself, then I think that should also be represented in business in terms of pushing for innovation, direction, things like that. Yeah, how do you, would you like to add anything at all to the topic of cultural diversity?
Diversity. I suppose it depends on the industry you're in and how much of an influence it has, but certainly, for example, in the training industry or even in the food industry, you know, being aware of the diversity issues and being, I suppose, respectful of them and the differences creates opportunity, I think. And I mean, the workplace is changing
Sorry, so
so quickly at the moment to me that
you're cutting out there.
unless you are embracing the diversity and
Sorry, so I'm really
just in
struggling.
terms of the current workforce, it's changing so quickly at the moment. Nothing I can do. I'll try and get a headset on, Adam. Keep going.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Yep, you're definitely mentioning some good points there. Some other things are that, by having a diverse workforce, it also assists you in accessing overseas markets, or there might be some knowledge in some overseas markets that will only be available to you through a diverse workforce. And, it also can it does increase creativity, which is what I was talking about before with innovation. Creativity and innovation are very, very closely linked. And by bringing people together from a different range of experiences and backgrounds, you're going to get a whole, range of ideas and problem-solving ideas and different perspectives. And those different perspectives can increase the creativity, which can increase the level of innovation that can exist in the business. So there's some great reasons for doing so, for promoting a diverse workforce. Um, yeah, a couple of other facts here in diversity. There's more than 400 languages spoken from just people that are living in Australia alone at the moment. So clearly we are living in that environment. It's clear that we should also reflect that in our business approach as well. Now, diversity needs to be handled quite carefully. Management needs to demonstrate a commitment to diversity, and there's ways that you can do so. So bear in mind this question that you've got here, question 2, describe 3 examples of strategies that workforce can use to ensure that it has a diverse workforce. We'll come to that in a second, but some things that managers need to do to demonstrate the commitment might be to ensure that all staff are treated equally. I mean, this is legislation anyway. You've got to treat everybody equally.
Doesn't make any difference.
Beg your pardon? Yeah, look, they also some things like understanding clearly how to resolve conflict, understanding the differences between us are beautiful things. I mean, I guess that's what makes us all interesting is that we are different. So understanding that we are different and being able to find ways to integrate these differences in the team are the way to go. So having an open mind for the way that different people will communicate, different people will do things in different ways. So you've got to just keep that open mind for that. Now, some strategies on how to help diversify your workforce. So I guess we know that there's some benefits to having a diverse workforce. There are some challenges involved in that as well, but there are clear benefits. So how do we actually do that? And this is what this question number 2 that you've got here is. The question is, what are some strategies? What are some things that you can do? Um, I guess the first thing that I'll talk about in this one, strategy for diversifying your workforce, is you've got to build these strategies into your hiring process. So your recruitment process must be reflective of an attitude towards, encouraging diversity. So how can we do that? What are some ways that we can actually build some strategy into our hiring process? Well, first and foremost, it's got to incorporate the federal guidelines, federal legislation that we deal with, equal opportunity and anti-discrimination legislation. They're just minimums. They're minimums. So obviously we're not going to discriminate against somebody on the basis of their sex, age, religion, ethnicity, etc. So we've got to incorporate those EEO, equal opportunity guidelines, into our processes. That's pretty obvious. What about some of the not so obvious ones? Well, think about where you might advertise your roles. So you might use a particular website, you might use a particular newspaper, you might use a particular channel or method, if you like, medium, to do all of your advertising. Now, if you are advertising in the same place, using the same ad, appearing in the same location of that website or that newspaper, well, then guess what's going to happen? You're actually going to get the same people applying for your ads. So the first strategy is you can consider different ways to send that message out. So don't just advertise using the same ad in the same place. Try different methods. Try using different websites. Try using different locations that are going to attract different people. So we're going to find a way to get our word out there to different people, and we've got to be flexible with the way that we go about it. Secondary, another way is to have a selection committee which is diverse and in of itself. So the people that are responsible for making final selections or for selecting the people that are involved in the entire recruitment process, even have diversity built into that team, because they will be able to see and understand and relate to a much wider diverse population in that regard. So that's a good strategy. Education is another good strategy. So it's really important to educate, your staff on the benefits of it. Other ways is you can also get staff to recommend people for jobs too. This is also a bit of a retention strategy in and of itself. People who are recommended for jobs tend to last longer than those who are not, interestingly enough. And people tend to only recommend people that they are comfortable in recommending as well. I've had plenty of situations where I haven't felt comfortable recommending friends to roles because I just didn't think that they would uphold the necessary standard, and I was worried it might be reflective of myself. So that is definitely a tactic. Um, yeah, there is a couple of strategies to, I guess, to ensure that you've got diversity in your workforce. Have you got any other thoughts or ideas on this second question here at all, Sue? Now, the second part of that question is not only to ensure it has a diverse workforce, which is what I've talked about, but manage cross-cultural issues as well. So, what are some strategies that can be used to manage some of those? Well, uh, I think promoting diversity is a really important stage and really important part. So, what you could do to help promote diversity in your work teams is mix teams up. So, if you're a team leader, change the teams up a little bit, change people around, let people get to know one another a little bit better. View employees as individuals, so avoid putting positive or negative stereotypes on people. Even the positive ones can actually put them into a sort of, into a space. Don't make assumptions about people, I think. And also try and encourage staff to even socialize with each other is a great way to really encourage that, um, that diversity as well. And I guess another way to ensure uh, that you're bringing in a diverse workforce is there's a difference between fair and same versus same treatment. So most people think that fairness means that you're treating everybody in exactly the same way. That's not necessarily the best way to go about it. So although we want to make sure that there's an equal sort of that we do want to make sure that it is a fair process when we are recruiting, but doing it exactly the same may not be fair because how well everybody does with, maybe employees have limited English or language skills or reading proficiency. It may not, or it may affect their ability to do their jobs. But if it doesn't, we've got to be careful not to run the same process exactly the same way, in the fear that we might, you know, eliminate potential candidates that might be applicable and appropriate for the job, but based on either language skills, reading skills, those sorts of areas, they may be sort of out of the mix. So that sort of takes care of that question. There's another one here. Actually, probably an area that we wanted to talk about was, well, we've got these last two questions here. Becoming an organisation which is an employer of choice. So becoming an employer of choice is actually a strategy by business because it assists business in retaining staff. The more turnover of staff we have, the more money we're spending on our recruitment processes, um, and also it means that the internal investments that we've made on staff, i.e., time spent talking, meeting, upskilling, training, all of those things walks out the door with it at the same time. So what we want to do is ensure that we minimize the amount of people that leave us because those people have skills, those people have knowledge, and it's in addition, it's obviously quite an expensive thing to keep bringing staff in and out. So we want to make sure that we're an employer of choice. How do you actually go about doing that? There's probably many ways to cut this one up. Um, for me, you've got to provide a positive working environment. It's probably ground zero. It's a really important part. So the best work environment start at the top. So by making managers and supervisors aware of how their actions impact on retention, then less people actually leave. A retention plan should be designed to engage employees at work. So try and create a positive work environment. It's important that you recognize and reward and reinforce good behavior as well. So people, most people will go to work because they need to earn money. But the money is actually not their main driver, and it's not necessarily the thing that'll actually keep them there long term. It's usually the minimum entrance. So if I get paid a certain amount, okay, great. Now we're in business. Let's talk. But it's not this. It's not what will actually keep people in the business long term. So you've got to recognize people's behavior, reward them for their good behavior, and human beings just need to feel appreciated, generally speaking. So being part of being a really good or part of creating a culture that is an organization that people want to be a part of, you've got to embrace recognition and reinforce good behavior. Also, people like to be involved. So people are more committed and engaged if they're actually actively sought to put forward ideas. So if you engage people in the ideas process, involve people, help them to get a bit of ownership in their space, it actually encourages them to stay because they're part of building something that's actually greater than their own specific role. If you can show somebody how their role fits in with the grand scheme of things, so somebody might have a quite a repetitive sort of role in the team, you've got to show them how that adds up and how it actually relates to the entire business. Also, people like to be challenged as well, so you want to keep developing skills. A good business and a good culture will always continue to develop skills, see potential in their team, and give staff opportunities. As we said, there's skills in the team that we don't even know about, and we're off hiring people and hiring difficult roles, quite niche positions. We might be able to look at upskilling people instead, doing it differently. So also, good organizations tend to have great employee engagement programs. They do, they have once a month, you might go out for drinks. You might have sort of social committees where you try and create a social calendar and social events. But also, I guess, they're probably the main sort of points I wanted to make in terms of being an employer of choice. A couple of tips: listen to your employees. Listen to them. You've got to always listen to them. Um, Here's a quote from a gentleman by the name of Edwards Demings uh, in reference to the word autonomy. Now, this is not complete freedom to do whatever you want. It is defined as decision rights. So, Edwards Demings said people support what they help create. And this is what we were talking about before, about involving people in key decisions. So giving workers participation opportunities gives them a feeling of belonging. Allowing them to help create these opportunities for participation gives them pride, gives them ownership, and a deep sense of fulfillment that motivates their creativity. The other thing is you want to keep it authentic. So if you're trying to create a culture in the business, you should incorporate a corporate culture that's authentic to your business. It's got to be authentic to your industry. It's got to reflect your personality, the way you potentially interact with your marketplace. It's best not to try and force a culture which is not authentic to the business. So IBM, they have their own corporate culture. Zappos, the fruit lollies, they have a very different corporate culture to the way IBM runs their business. Now each is authentic to their own business. It's important that you make sure that yours is authentic to the personality of your business as well. I think people notice when there's a lack of authenticity. It's sort of felt, it's noticed. Yeah. Also, gather feedback from your staff, ask questions, try and improve the culture. Look at it like a serious thing that you want to do. And try and get some feedback, which is why I've gone from question 4, and I'm going to go back to question 3. Explain why exit interviews are so important when planning for the future. Well, exit interviews are actually part of a greater strategy to build this culture. So it does relate back to this fourth question, because as I said, getting feedback is a really important part of business, and listening and then getting feedback from your staff is an important part of building that culture. But it's also a retention strategy. So exit interviews are about understanding why, knowing the reasons or the reasons why your employees leave. If you understand these reasons or you know these reasons, it'll actually assist you in identifying potential weaknesses that might exist in your organization. Um, so yeah, an exit interview is simply just that. It's an interview which takes place when somebody is walking out the door, when they've decided to leave the business. Most good organizations will take the time to have a conversation with their staff when they leave. Funnily enough, when somebody's halfway out the door, you get a lot of honesty at that point in time. Once the shackles are off, you hear a lot of stuff. It can be emotionally driven at that point, especially when somebody is halfway out the door and have been emotionally invested in the business for a period of time. But it's a really important thing. Some of the questions, exit interview questions that you might ask are, you know, the obvious ones. What are your reasons for leaving? Because the reality is somebody might put in their notice, I'm leaving in 2 weeks, not a problem. Nobody actually knows why. The business can't learn from that. They can't identify any areas that they need to work on, uh, that sort of thing. Also, you'll ask questions about the organizational culture, how does it work? Could it be better? What are things that are working? What are things that are not working? You might ask questions about supervisors or team leaders. How does this supervisor, how do they act? Were they good? Were they not good? Are there areas for improvement? Anything like policies or procedures that might be identified as having issues on it, things like that. So depending on the size of your organization, you want to obtain as many of these exit interviews as possible. Uh, Organizations tend to ignore the angry employees. They don't want to talk to them because it's just easier not to. The other ones you probably should talk to the most, I would say, if you're going to be really quite real and honest and, and get some information. And so that's, I guess that's a little bit about exit interviews. Sue, did you want to mention anything at all on exit interviews? Have you got anything you'd like to add to that one? I think we've lost you. Are you there? Sue, are you there? Okay, can you turn up your microphone a little bit, please? We'll try and get this happening. Okay. So I can barely hear, but if you'd like to add your last little bit to being an employer of choice or exit interviews, retention strategies, or anything to the initial conversation of workforce planning. Okay. I think we're having a few audio problems. Guys, that is probably all we're going to talk about today as far as this first section goes. So that ends the first resource support workshop, researching workforce requirements. Just to recap those questions. First question, what processes do you have in place to collect and keep workplace information on numbers and employees, age and gender breakdown? So we talked about workforce planning is about profiling your workforce initially. So what process have you got in place to profile your workforce? 3 examples of strategies that a workforce can put into place to ensure that it either does one of 2 things: brings a diverse workforce into the business and then manages that diverse workforce well. So 3 things, combination of those. I've talked a little bit about the sort of recruitment and selection ideas. what are some other ideas that you've got there? Have a look at the learning materials for some other ideas on this one. And then we talked a little bit at the end about exit interviews and how they relate to an overall strategy of building culture as well as retention, which is obviously directly related to the conversation of building a workforce planning. And yeah, then we started talking a little bit at the end about employee engagement and being a workplace of choice, and what the sort of things that we need to do to make sure that we're getting people that want to be in the business sticking around for a long time, and also skilled people that want to come and join our business as well. That's some of the, I guess, the benefits of being an employer of choice. Thanks very much for your attendance today. Thanks for joining us as well, Sue. And we look forward to catching you in the next session. Thanks, Kylie.